Hey, good evening, folks. Thanks for tuning in tonight. My name's Dave Rempis. I'm a saxophone player here in Chicago, doing another weekly stream. I'm going to be announcing a brand new record again tonight as part of my Aerophonic Records record label. We've been doing a digital release once a week now, every Wednesday with a live stream. And so this is the fourth week in a row that we've done those. The last few weeks we rolled out a new record called Hornithology, which is a duo record with myself and Mars Williams. 2 weeks ago we came out with The Eagle, which is a quartet with Michael Foster, young saxophone player from New York, Jason Rebke on bass, and Tyler Damon on drum, both Chicagoans who I work with pretty regularly over the years. And last week we launched Triple Double, which is a quartet with the great Jamie Branch on trumpet, along with Ingebrigt Håker Flaten on bass and Tolif Ostfang on drums. So yeah, a few people tuning in I see. Yep, we were starting with a little Sun Ra there to warm things up. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. I want to begin tonight with a piece by the great Charles Mingus. This seems appropriate for the times, kind of biblical. This is a tune he wrote called Ecclesiastics. Thanks very much. That was Ecclesiastics by Charles Mingus. That was off the record Oh Yeah, which was an early purchase of mine. I was very happy to discover Mingus at a young age. I got a job at a pharmacy when I was a freshman in high school, and there was a genuine weirdo who worked there. He worked the counter from about 9 to 3 every day. So when I came in after school, we had a little overlap in our shift, and his name was Hugh, and he was kind of paranoid, schizophrenic, manic, depressive, bipolar type. Really, really sweet guy though. And when he found out that I was into jazz, he gave me a record that was left over from his Columbia Record Club subscription that they'd just mailed him inadvertently because he forgot to send the postcard back in. And it was Charles Mingus's Tijuana Moods, which I listened to about 1 million times. And from there started buying a lot of Mingus as a young musician. And some other records that I got around that time were Shoes of the Fisherman's Wife and and a lot of the Columbia stuff. And Oh Yeah was one of the amazing records that I loved. Mingus actually plays piano on that instead of bass, and Doug Watkins takes over on bass, and Rasan Roland Kirk is the featured soloist on a lot of it. So it's a pretty amazing record. So I've always loved that tune, Ecclesiastics, so I thought I would do that today. So this week we're launching once again a brand new record on Aerophonic Records. Pardon me 1 minute. I'm going to hold up a sign. I don't know if that's appearing backwards or forwards, but aerophonicrecords.com, or maybe that looks a little better, aerophonicrecords.com, if you can see that. That's where you can buy all of my releases. I've been spending a lot of time during the quarantine period working on getting a lot of releases out there, basically a weekly digital release as well as a number of new hard copy things that have come out recently, including Of Things Beyond Thule Volume 2, which is with Joe McPhee, Tamika Reed, Brandon Lopez, and Paul Nilsson Love, so that's a pretty amazing lineup. And a new duo record with my longtime friend and collaborator, Frank Rosalie. Both of those came out officially last week, actually, although they've been on sale for a month. You can find all of that stuff as well as the digital releases that I'm doing each week at aerophonicrecords.com. So this week's digital release is actually a live recording from last year's Chicago Jazz Festival. I have a regular working quartet here in Chicago with Jim Baker on piano and electronics, Joshua Abrams on bass, and Avreeayl Ra on drums. And we were very fortunate to be invited to play the main stage at the Chicago Jazz Festival last year, opening up on Sunday afternoon for the main stage programming on September 1st last year. Unfortunately, there was a bit of a booking snafu with the festival where they forgot to ask us if we could play before they announced it in the newspaper. And unfortunately, Josh Abrams was already scheduled to be on tour with his incredible working band Natural Information Society at the time. They had a few festival performances in Europe. So unfortunately, he couldn't make the gig at the Chicago Jazz Festival, which was, really disappointing for all of us. But thankfully, Ingebrigt Håker Flaten, who's a Norwegian bass player who I've worked with many, many times over the years, and everyone else in the band had also worked with him quite a lot. He was in town to perform with Rob Mazurik's Desert in Crypts, also at the Jazz Festival. And so we asked him to sit in Josh Abrams' place, and he did. He did a fantastic job. It was a really beautiful afternoon of performance, lovely weather. I know the booking committee of the Chicago Jazz Festival was extremely nervous to be presenting really for the first time on the main stage a free improvising band, which as Avreeayl pointed out a couple weeks ago when we were talking about putting this out, it was probably the first time in the history of the Chicago Jazz Festival that they presented a free improvising band on the main stage. So it was really kind of a big deal and a big honor for us to be in that position. I mean, the festival has booked a lot of incredible things over the years, but that was likely the first time they had a free improvising band. And so the booking committee was nervous as hell. You could see them off on the side, like waiting for the crowd to storm the stage and, throw us off. But actually, the vibe was really great. The audience seemed to love it. We got warm applause and shouts of appreciation, and so it was really a nice thing to be able to play to about 8,000 people and do the music that we work on as improvisers all the time and rarely get the opportunity to put it out in front of that many people. So it was really a beautiful experience. The recording itself is called Millenniums. It's now available at aerophonicrecords.com. I urge you to go pick that up. The proceeds from all of these digital releases are getting split evenly between all of the musicians who perform on them. So it's a really fantastic way to help support some of the artists involved in my label, some of the people who I work with regularly. The more we sell, the more groceries everybody can buy. So thanks. I'm going to continue now with another improvisation on the tenor saxophone this time. I left the baritone at home tonight. I figured maybe I'll focus on that one next week and take a break from lugging 3 horns around. So I'm going to do an improvisation now on tenor saxophone. And thank you once again for being here. Really appreciate everybody tuning in each week. Thanks. That was a little tenor saxophone improvisation. To those of you who've been tuning in a little bit over the last few weeks, I've kind of been going into some of my own personal history here and, thinking a bit about what some of my influences were as a young person. I talked with James Falzone, a good friend of mine, who's a fantastic clarinet player and composer. This was probably a year or two ago now, and he mentioned that he studied with Ren Blake at New England Conservatory, the great pianist. And one of the things that he would have his students do is like really kind of unpack all their early influences of what really caught their ear when they were a kid. And one of the things I did a few weeks ago was play a James Brown tune called Motherlode, which was an instrumental. And I was very happy and lucky that my friend Woody in South Carolina actually mailed me a copy of that record on vinyl that I got last week, which was like one of the sweetest, most incredible gifts I've gotten in a long time. So I just want to say a big thank you to Woody for that. Woody actually works at one of my favorite jazz shops in the world. It's called Papa Jazz in Columbia, South Carolina. I still have a lot of CDs, and I love going through my collection and occasionally picking out that CD that has the Papa Jazz price sticker on it still, because it just brings back all these incredible memories of being in that shop. It's really one of those places that's run like a record store of the 1950s, where you can walk in and go up to the counter and tell them what you like, and they'll make some great recommendations. You can listen to stuff. They're just like, it's really what a record store should be, like basically as a community center. And if anybody's interested, my friend Woody is down there putting together packages for people. I like to buy gospel music when I'm down there, because in South Carolina they have a lot of great gospel stuff, and their used gospel section is always fantastic. So like, I know I can go in and say to Woody, hey man, I want to spend $40, pick out some gospel records for me, and he'll get me the most amazing stuff I can imagine. They're doing that right now. So if you're a record buyer and you want to find some amazing stuff, call up Papa Jazz in Columbia, South Carolina, and ask for Woody. He will take care of you. It's funny, I was talking with a couple of musician friends this week, Nels Klein and C. Spencer Ye, who I've both known for quite a while, and we were all kind of laughing about the fact that we still like CDs, actually. They seem to become very passé as the digital revolution took over, but to me, I actually really prefer them to LPs, to cassettes, certainly to digital. You still have artwork, you still have a physical frame of reference that you can look at and have memories. You can see that price sticker from the shop you bought it at. All that kind of stuff. It's like this tangible physical object that you can really love and appreciate in a way that you really can't with like digital downloads and that kind of thing. So just a shout out to Woody and all my friends at Papa Jazz. I do want to mention one more time, my record label is aerophonicrecords.com. We just put out a new record today, live from the Chicago Jazz Festival at Millennium Park last year. The record's called Millenniums, with myself, Jim Baker on piano and electronics, Ingebrigt Håker Flaten on bass, and Avreeayl Ra on drums. So please check that out. I'm going to do another piece on alto now. This is going to be another improvisation for you. Thanks very much. That was an alto saxophone improvisation. Once again, my name is Dave Rempis, saxophone player here in Chicago, coming to you from my rehearsal studio in the Edgewater neighborhood of Chicago at Unity Lutheran Church. It suddenly got hot as hell up in here. Not a lot of circulation, and Chicago finally turned into summer this past weekend. So that's a nice thing, but I'm sweating quite a bit. Pardon me one moment. Oh, so as I mentioned, I have a brand new record out today on Aerophonic Records, which is aerophonicrecords.com. That's with some of my long-term working musician friends, Jim Baker on piano and harp, Avreeayl Ra on percussion, and Ingebrigt Håker Flaten on bass. I've known all those folks for quite a while, and I thought it might be fun to kind of delve into a little of my history with all of them. I first saw Jim Baker at the Lunar Cabaret in 1995 with a band of Ken Vandermark's called Steam, and I just remember Jim, you know, who's kind of a lovely, eccentric person, walking over to the counter where they had some baked goods sitting on the counter because they were a cafe during the day, and they had like some bagels and muffins and things like that, and he picked up this bagel that was saran wrapped, and he held it up in front of him, and he was just walking around the room going, is this a bagel? Is this a bagel? Kind of over and over again, which was kind of funny to see. My first glimpse into Jim Baker, and I got to see him play on a million shows over the years, say between around 1995 and 1999, which is I think about the first time that Jim and I played together when we started a trio with Jason Rebke on bass. They used to play at Lula Cafe. For those of you who are from Chicago and know Lula Cafe, you know, that's like a very fancy fine dining restaurant. But back in the day, they were a little bit more kind of neighborhood, you know, small town vibe. And they used to let us set up and play in the front window doing free improv stuff. And it was always amazing to see the staff's reaction as Jim Baker would basically deconstruct their upright piano, taking all the panels off it, there were all these plants off it that he would move, and then he'd stick duct tape all over the strings because the piano was in such bad shape anyways. It was just better to prepare it, but you could see the staff kind of freaking out every week as Jim would like completely disassemble their piano all over the floor. It was pretty funny. Avreeayl Ra I met around the same time. I did a year abroad in college where I studied in Ghana for a year, studying anthropology and ethnomusicology, which is actually where these wall hangings came from. These are basically just some cloth that I bought by the yard when I was studying in Ghana for, you know, they were probably like $1.50 a yard, so I think I paid about $3 or $5 for each of them, and they've been following me ever since, but I really love them, and those came from, yeah, when I was studying in Ghana for a year during college. When I came back, Chicago had like really exploded. This was in 1996. There was so much happening. The Velvet Lounge was happening, the Empty Bottle series that Ken Vandermark and John Corbett curated for about 10 years was happening, which was amazing. There were a lot of clubs around town doing a lot of different things, and I happened to land in this situation. I had a lot of friends who were DJs at WNUR, which is the Northwestern University radio station, and as soon as I got back from Ghana, they were, you know, dragging me to like every show all the time. I was going down to the Velvet Lounge quite a lot. The DKV trio with Ken Vandermark and Ken Kessler and Hamid Drake used to do a monthly weekend stand there that Fred Anderson would also guest on every month. So I started going down to see that, and then started exploring some of the other things that they had going on at the Velvet. You know, for a long time, many of the mainstays there were Nicole Mitchell and David Boykin and Ernest Dawkins and Douglas Ewart. One group that I remember going to see, which is the first time I saw Avreeayl Ra play, was Ari Browns Trio with Malachi Favors on bass from the Art Ensemble of Chicago, and Avreeayl Ra on drums. And that was just a really beautiful, amazing experience to go see that band. Some other things at the Velvet, I mean, I remember seeing Fred Anderson with Peter Kovald and Hamid Drake. Is a beautiful concert that came out, I believe, on Okadisc as a trio record. There was a great concert with Steve Lacy with his working trio at the time, which was Jean-Jacques Avenel on bass and John Betch on drums. You know, I just remember walking into the Velvet, which was completely packed out for that. Steve Lacy was so thrilled by the vibe of the place. Fred Anderson had printed up the Critics' Choice that week from the Chicago Reader for the concert, and he printed it up extra large, and Steve Lacy signed that Critics' Choice, and he said, "This place is a temple. which I think everybody who walked into the Velvet Lounge over the years felt that right away. And to see it on the wall every time I walked in, and Steve Lacy's handwriting, up on a big poster on the wall was really fantastic, and such a beautiful thing. At the same time, at that time, I was going down to the Empty Bottle to check concerts out. They had a Wednesday night series. The Vandermark 5 had been doing Tuesdays there since 1996. And I actually went up to Ken Vandermark after one of his concerts at the Velvet Lounge one night. And this was just after I was getting out of school. And I knew that I really wanted to focus on playing for a bit. And, I had considered the idea of continuing my studies in anthropology and ethnomusicology, but I decided against it. From the time I was in Ghana, I really got re-inspired to play saxophone after dropping out of music school, and feeling like there was no path ahead for me because I really wasn't interested in the classical saxophone thing I was doing. I really wasn't interested in what was presented to me as jazz in the academic setting. And so I, kind of backed off everything. But, going to Ghana, I had the opportunity to play with a lot of musicians there, in some kind of traditional ensembles, in high life and reggae bands. And it was funny to be a saxophone player because there weren't a lot of saxophone players. So I was like in high demand, and people actually wanted to play with me, which felt so amazing. So I totally got really re-inspired to focus on saxophone again. And when I graduated a year later, I decided I was going to continue that path rather than go back to school. And that fall, I went to a concert at Ken Vandermark's at the Velvet Lounge, and afterwards I went up to him and said, I'd like to take some lessons with you. And so, a week or two later, I went over to his house. I played for him some of the music that I'd been working on, and I took a few lessons with him. And, about a month or two after that, I came home one day, and there was a message on my phone from Ken, and this was back when you had an answering machine at home because nobody had cell phones yet. So I came home from work one night from bartending and, hit play on the answering machine. And it was Ken Vandermark asking me to come and audition for his working band, the Vandermark 5, because Mars Williams, who was the saxophone player at that time, was leaving the band because he was just too busy with other projects. So I kind of freaked out. It was like for me, the opportunity of a lifetime, and a big foot in the door to a lot of the music and the scene that I'd come to appreciate so much. So I went, auditioned. It went pretty well. Ken hired me to be in the band, and from March of 1998 on, I started that gig at the Empty Bottle every Tuesday from 1998 until 2005, pretty much doing every Tuesday night at the Empty Bottle with the Vandermark 5. There were certainly a lot of weeks where either we were on tour or Ken was on tour, and I actually had the opportunity at that time to bring in one of my working groups, which is a trio called Triage, with Tim Daisy, who's a fantastic drummer. I still work with Tim all the time. The original bass player in that band was a guy named Gordon Lewis, and then it became Jason Agemian, all great friends still. And that was really my first working trio, and we had this amazing opportunity to basically sub for the Vandermark 5 at the Empty Bottle for about 8 years. Whenever that band couldn't play, we were basically kind of the first call band to come in and replace them. So, that was really a beautiful time for me, really getting into the scene for the first time. And I met Ingebrigt Håker Flaten right around the same time, also through Ken Vandermark. Ken had done a tour, I believe, with a band he had called School Days with Jeb Bishop on trombone, Paul Nilsson Love on drums, Sheldon Nordison on vibes, and Ingebrigt Håker Flaten on bass. And they finished in Chicago, and we organized a little event for them at what would later become Elastic Arts. At the time it was called, I think, the Drastic Elastic Foundation or something drastic, but it was a loft space down on Cermak right by the river, not too far from the Velvet Lounge, where Elastic Arts started down there in 1998. And so in 1999, one of the first concerts that we organized of improvised music was basically kind of a jam session featuring Paul Nilsson Love and Ingebrigt Håker Flaten that I believe Jim Baker also played on, Ken Vandermark, Tim Daisy, Michael Culligan, fantastic reedist. I believe Fred Longberg Home was there. So that was the first time I met Ingebrigt, and I remember going back to Ken's place afterwards, listening to a bunch of records. I distinctly remember listening to an Arnett Cobb record with Ingebrigt, and we were both kind of drunk and so blown away by his playing, but also blown away by how much at the time he really seemed to sound like Anthony Braxton, which was a interesting connection to make because those are not two players who you often put together. But I'm going to continue now with another improvisation on the tenor saxophone this time, and just for the hell of it, since I just brought up Arnett Cobb, I'm going to dedicate this one to Arnett Cobb. Thanks. In some strange way, that was for Arnett Cobb. If you don't know him, man, check him out. There's a fantastic record called Very Saxy with Coleman Hawkins, Eddie Lockshaw Davis, Arnett Cobb, and I'm forgetting the last saxophone player. It's an incredible record with Shirley Scott on organ, 4 tenor saxophones going head to head. I highly recommend it. Very Saxy. Great record. I'm going to do one more piece tonight. Once again, Aerophonic The new release this week is called Millenniums, featuring myself on saxophones, Jim Baker on piano and electronics, Ingebrigt Håker Flaten on bass, and Avreeayl Ra on drums. That was recorded live at the Chicago Jazz Festival main stage in Millennium Park, September 1st of last year. So I really urge you to check that out. My last piece tonight I want to do for... one other thing. It's our 7th anniversary at Aerophonic Records this very spring, coming up in a couple weeks on June 11th. We started a promotion called 7x7, which is 7 records for 7 years for $70. So a pretty big discount. Check that out at aerophonicrecords.com if you're interested. We just extended that promotion through June 11th, which is actually our official 7th anniversary date. So yeah, check that out if you can. The last piece I'm going to do tonight is a piece by Sun Ra. It was his birthday the other day. It was also Marshall Allen's birthday last week. Both of those musicians have certainly had a great impact on me over the years. I had the pleasure to see Sun Ra play in 1993 when I was in high school. I went to a club in Boston called the Middle East, which is a pretty well-known rock club with a big basement, and Sun Ra and the orchestra were playing down there. Actually, Sun Ra was in the hospital at the time. It was just before he passed away, so the band was playing without him, but it was nonetheless a truly amazing concert. Seeing Marshall Allen for the first time really changed my perspective on how one can play the alto saxophone, watching him do all these like karate chop things on the side of the horn, and just the way he moved on the instrument was very much like the way a dancer moves. And it was almost like, you know, watching him approach his instrument was a completely new way of dealing with the instrument. And that really opened my eyes to a lot of different possibilities of how to get sound out of an instrument, and what a gesture could mean, what a physical gesture could mean, what the physicality of an instrument means, and what your own physicality means in terms of, you know, how your body interacts with this very strange archaic machine. So that was a big experience for me. I actually had the chance to play with Marshall Allen about, I think it was 4 years ago now. I did a tour with Larry Oakes on saxophones from Rova Saxophone Quartet, and another Bay Area improviser, Darren Johnston. We have a horn trio called Spectral, and we did a tour in the United States for about 2 weeks in the spring of, I believe it was 2015, so 5 years ago. And we were booked in Philadelphia at the very end of the tour, and the presenter there called us up and said, "Hey, I forgot it's Marshall Allen's birthday on the day that you guys are playing. Would you want him to be a guest?" And of course we said yes. So we had the opportunity to play with Marshall Allen, and it was quite amazing because as a 91-year-old man, he played in Chicago the night before with his quartet with no, I take it back, it wasn't that band, but I believe it was with Avreeayl Ra and maybe Henry Grimes. But he flew in from Chicago. He went home for about half an hour. He came straight to the gig, was hanging out. We played about an hour or 70-minute set. And at the end of it, he wanted to keep going, which was pretty amazing. I mean, you think about energy level for a 91-year-old man. And I remember watching him squat down, you know, like squatting to put his horn away. And he was down there for like 2 minutes. Like, I don't know a lot of 91-year-old men who can squat down like that and then just pop right back up and keep going, especially after playing a 70-minute concert. So the even better part of this story is that we went down to Baltimore the next night, and he joined us there as well. And we went to this incredible house party. It was Memorial Day, actually, and we went to an amazing house party with really hundreds of people there, where they were cooking everything under the sun, from like suckling pig to alligator to squirrel to like, I mean, I've never seen so much food in my life. And Pete, Marshall got down there pretty early. Danny Ray Thompson, who was the baritone player in the Sun Ra Orchestra, had driven him down. Danny kind of took care of Marshall for a long time, and Danny actually just passed away a few months ago. But so that we were hanging out, drinking a bit, and we got to the concert. This was 4 p.m. We got to the concert about 8 o'clock. People were feeling pretty loose. We did our sound check, and we were sitting at the bar talking, and Marshall said, I'm going to go outside and have a smoke, watch my drink. And so he got up and walked out the door to have a cigarette, and Danny Ray Thompson looked over at us and said, I'm going to drink it. He's not going to remember. So he grabbed his drink and started drinking it, and we laughed and just figured, yeah, he's 91. He probably won't remember when he comes back. So about half an hour, Marshall Allen walks back in, and he'd been out front smoking and talking with all these people out front. And he comes up to the bar, and, we figured he'd just forget about it. And first thing he says when he walks up to the bar is, "Where's my drink?" Which, again, pretty amazing for a 91-year-old and totally inspiring. So this last one goes out to Marshall Allen and Sun Ra and Danny Ray Thompson and all the fantastic musicians that made up that band for so long. I think it's an appropriate piece to finish out with in this time as well. This song is called Planet Earth. Thank you very much. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Really, really appreciate it. Good to see you all again this week. I'm going to be back next week. This time, I may not be on Twitch. It may be on Instagram next week. I'm trying to work out some technical difficulties, but unfortunately I don't have Wi-Fi at my space, so I'm going to have to choose one medium. And next week is sponsored by the Mothlight in Asheville, North Carolina. They're normally using Instagram, so that may be the platform for next week, but I'll be sure to list it on my website at daverempis.com/live, where I know many of you are watching. I really appreciate you being here. Check out the new record, Millenniums, aerophonicrecords.com, and big thanks to all of you. See you next week. Take care.